let's move on to your interview with Naomi Klein. Maybe you can set this up, because you two had a great conversation. She was name-checked in a Compact Magazine Substack article by Jeff Schollenberger, who's a really interesting writer and was reflecting on his own memories of what the left was like at the end of the 90s and in the early aughts, when the no-logo movement that Naomi Klein obviously gave name to, but was inspired by and then became a part of through the work of No Logo. He was reflecting and saying this was a real push against globalization. And I went back and watched a documentary that Naomi Klein did. I think she tells you in this interview that it was back in 2000, where there's a clip of her talking about globalization's impact. Much of the documentary is focused on globalization's impact on sweatshop laborers, and that'll be very familiar to people who remember these days. But a lot of it also was focused on what had happened to American workers. And there was this slice of the interview, about a minute long, where she sounded, back in 2000, a lot of the same notes that people on the right are sounding now in defense of Trump's tariff policy overall, if not the particular tactics, but of the policy.
Right. Yeah, and credit to you for suggesting this interview. We wanted to have her on the show this morning, but she lives on the west coast of Canada, so it's like way too early for that. So I interviewed her yesterday afternoon. Well, let's roll some of that.
All right, joining us now to talk more about this global collapse of the New World Order, or whatever we want to call it.
I think they call it a Great Reset, right?
The Great Reset. This is the Great Reset. Is none other than Naomi Klein, who, relevant to this conversation, is the author of many books, but in particular No Logo, published in 1999, which kind of drew inspiration from and also provided inspiration to the burgeoning anti-globalization movement at the time. I don't know if I told you this. I got my kind of radical political awakening, from that and from Seattle, and then I ended up Seattle was end of 1999. I was in college on the East Coast, so I was not about to go to Seattle, but I did go to. They called it A16. This was the
it was the IMF World Bank in Washington D.C. Yeah,
April 2020. This like 2 or 3 day protest. One day was beautiful. Another day it was like 40 degrees and raining, and I remember just getting drenched the entire day, and then they finish it off by pepper spraying everybody, tear gassing. Were you did you go to the Washington one?
I was at the Washington one. Yeah. I actually wasn't in Seattle. No Logo was at the printer. I was writing about it, but I couldn't convince anyone to send me, because at that point, you couldn't convince sort of mainstream editors that there was a possible story to be told, because the movement had yet to sort of burst onto the world stage as it did.
Right, Seattle was kind of the introduction of that movement to the world, and they understood. Okay, there is something going on here. And I'll put this piece up real quick, because they talk about this this phenomenon, this Compact Magazine piece that has a very funny headline. What did y'all think post-neoliberalism meant? Vibes, papers, essays, the strange career of anti-globalization politics. And this is a reference to, obviously a famous kind of, I guess it was a tweet on October 7th. What did y'all think, post-colonialism or decolonialism, meant? So it's a kind of satirical riff on this. But they mentioned that after September 11th attacks, the energy around the anti-globalization movement really moved into anti-war politics, trying to stop the looming invasion of Iraq, unsuccessfully trying to stop that, and obviously failed to do so, and didn't really bubble back until 2010. And so now here we are, more than 25 years later, and the biggest wrecking ball that's brought to the system of global free trade is brought by Donald Trump. So, and brought in a way that is, I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So I'm just curious, what's been your reaction to seeing the arc from Seattle to Trump?
I have to say that quite a few of the think pieces, I'll put that in air quotes a little bit, including the one that you just put up there, are based on a bunch of really wrong assumptions about what that movement was in the first place. Not to say that there weren't protectionist elements to it. It was always a kind of an awkward coalition of more nationalist trade unions and internationalist human rights activists, environmentalists. You know, the slogan in Seattle was Teamsters and Turtles together again, which was a reference to the fact that there was this coalition between big unions like the Teamsters that were more interested in just protecting American jobs, and environmentalists who were looking at how environmental deregulation or a race to the bottom was impacting, in this case, turtles who are being caught up in fishing nets. But the point is, we spent a ton of time back in the day actively correcting the record that we were not opposed to trade. We were opposed to, the phrase we used at the time was corporate rule, you know, and there were huge teach-ins in Seattle and Washington that were all about the fact that this thing that was just calling itself, you know, this kind of anodyne, you know, free trade was not free, that it was a wish list for multinational corporations, overwhelmingly U.S. corporations, to just maximize their profits. And we are very, very far into that successful revolution. What we were naming at the time was that what this particular set of trade rules that were all about deregulation and pushing privatization and economic austerity would deliver would be a race to the bottom globally on labor, on environmental standards. And, you know, I think anybody who thinks that Trump represents an end to corporate rule, and that, you know, no, he is the fulfillment of it. Musk is the fulfillment of it. And definitely there are rifts inside their strange and awkward coalition about exactly how to go about this. But I would say the race to the bottom has been successful. And I think the reason why there is even the prospect of reshoring some production in the United States is because unions have been so successfully weakened over these 30 years, because they're counting on a huge amount of automation. So they're not planning on paying any workers for most of this onshore production. And they've been saying this openly, right? Like, oh, we're going to be bringing like the iPhone assembly jobs back, but it's not going to be humans who are going to be assembling them, right? And the other piece of this, and it's kind of driving me mad that people aren't connecting the dots, is where Doge fits in with all of this, right? Because here is Musk and the boys who are decimating the regulatory state. So if there is, to an extent that there will be some onshoring under this new regime, like bringing jobs back to the U.S., it's going to be precisely under the conditions of that race to the bottom that we were trying to stop in the first place, right? So this is not an end to neoliberalism. In many ways, it's sort of logical culmination. And yeah, we tried to stop it. So, you know, sue us. We did try.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my colleague Emily, who couldn't join us for this, found this clip from many years ago. Maybe you can tell us when exactly this was. Wanted to get your. I'll play this for you. The much younger Naomi Klein.
Oh God!
And then get your reaction to it now. How you would say it now.
But the significance for a company like Nike is that building these kind of utopian branded worlds costs much more than just advertising a product. So you often hear companies openly saying that we have made a choice. We have decided to build our brand. But that choice has consequences, and one of the consequences is that when that decision is made, it is often accompanied by a decision to sell off factories and to embrace the Nike model, the company that owns all this intellectual property but doesn't own any factories. When a company decides to embrace this model, that obviously immediately affects their workforces in North America and Europe. People who had steady unionized jobs, were paid enough to support a family, lose those jobs.
Cutting 6,000 jobs.
Now unemployed. Lost another 42,000 jobs.
Cutting 11,500
other jobs from factories across the South to plants overseas, where labor
is cheaper.
The communities that were built around a factory that depended on these factories are often gutted. And the jobs that often come to replace these manufacturing jobs are these new economy jobs that are often service sector jobs.
I would guess that you still agree with that analysis. When was that from, by the way, do you think?
Probably 2000.
Yeah.
I think, I was describing a business model that, a lot of the reporting on offshoring at the time was described as companies closing factories in one location and opening factories in another location. So what I was articulating in that clip, and it remains true, in most sectors. There are some sectors that never fully embrace this model, but I'll just put an asterisk there. But this idea that really owning your own factories is kind of a loser's game, right? Mm-hmm. That if you're smart, you keep it light. You own your intellectual property. You employ designers and marketers, but you are going to produce through a web of global outsourcing. The exception to this are the auto companies, like the really heavy manufacturing, that tended to continue to own their assembly plants, right? But everything that they could outsource to this web of contractors where you'd have some plausible deniability, they did. And that remains true. And this is, one of the people who really represents this very, very powerfully is Donald Trump, right? I mean, he is a quintessential sort of hollow brand that, particularly after The Apprentice, realized that he could make more money, not opening his own hotels and buildings, but leasing out the Trump brand to whoever wanted to slap it onto their development and so on. And so when you talk about U.S. companies bringing the jobs home, it's completely anachronistic to how most of these companies actually function. They don't want to own the kinds of factories at the level that they used to, because it's much, much more profitable to outsource all of that to a web of contractors. So some of them will come to the U.S., but they'll still continue to use the leverage of being able to pit different contractors and subcontractors against each other for who can deliver, the pieces of the assembly line at the lowest price. None of that is changing.
So let's say that the Trump administration, watched that clip and said, "Wow, this author really diagnosed the problem well. Come on in, tell us how we can fix this for American workers, and we can what should they be doing if they were actually serious about?"
That assumes that
Yes.
Donald Trump and Elon Musk have any interest in actually in genuinely helping American workers. If they wanted to do that, the surest way that they would do that is support labor rights instead of trying to undercut them,
Destroy
or
the NLRB. Yeah.
Destroy the NLRB. Fight unionization in your own plants, as Elon Musk has done. I think that this is really the cover story for their use. And I think, unfortunately, we have got a lot of labor leaders who are willing to play along with it. And maybe there will be some marginal gains, but that remains to be seen. I mean, I think it's a very big gamble for big unions like the UAW to support this tariff regime. And I think the global impact of this. I'm talking to you from Canada. And the way we, many of us understand the impact of these tariffs is this is not the U.S. returning to protectionism. As Trump says again and again, it's about leverage, right? If you listen to what he's actually saying, he's saying Canada is being unfair. Why are they being unfair? Because they're not letting our banks in they're not, and the U.S. healthcare sector desperately wants in. So, there are a few protections that remained in place under the neoliberal trading regime. And, I think that there's a calculation now, and there is an agreement, across the board among U.S. corporations that now the U.S. has the leverage to get even more, right? To knock down the remaining barriers. So, I don't believe he really is a protectionist in the way that he wants to market himself to U.S. manufacturing workers for whom he represents a kind of I've called it toxic nostalgia in the past, like this idea that you're going to return to some, manufacturing heyday that is past, and it isn't going to happen. And, where I think you really see the lie of it is around AI, because, some of his, the centerpiece of the biggest investments that he has announced so far as president have been with the big tech companies around massive data centers that are unleashing technologies that will decimate American jobs. So this idea that he would bring me in to figure out how to help American workers is absurd. I reject the premise. I don't, I think he's a marketer, and part of how he's marketing himself is as a champion of American workers who he has screwed his entire life.
Now, last question for you. One thing you've been really good at throughout your writing career has been seeing where things are going next, seeing around the corner that others couldn't quite see around. Do you still have that vision? Like, do you see, like, where do you see this going? Like, where is this? Where is the United States headed? Where's this world system headed?
Yeah. Well, this is where I think that these articles, these takes around, okay, this is what the left always wanted, the end of neoliberalism, as opposed to understanding that this is a new stage of deregulated capitalism, are really dangerous, because where I see it going, and here, this is not like some prophetic power. This is like actually listening to Peter Thiel, to Elon Musk, to the people who are underwriting the Trump administration, who, if you listen to what they say and also where they have put their money and what they're doing, what you see is they no longer believe in the nation state at all. They're excited about things like Freedom City. They're excited about places like Prospera in Honduras, where they managed to create like a sort of a corporate city state. They're very excited by the possibilities of what AI can accomplish. If in this kind of corporate secessionist movement. And so I think this really is a fulfillment of the corporate rule dream beyond the nation state. So they still see a role for the nation state at this phase, but I think beyond it, they want to shed it. So yeah, I think that's where we're headed. And I think acting as if this has been a wish fulfillment for the left is a really dangerous distraction.
From no logo to no state. Next. All logo.
And once again, you can find leftists who will make that same argument. This is not what they meant.
Right. Yes, it's not what we meant. That's not the withering that we meant. Naomi Klein, thank you so much for joining me. Very much appreciated. And good luck in Canada. Sorry that we're all of a sudden enemies.
That's all right.
I don't quite know how that happened.
We're going to gang up on you with the rest of the world. All right. Take care. All right.
I'd say it.
Bye.
All right, Emily, what'd you think?
This is what's interesting. It's sort of like you're faced with either, she's completely right about Elon Musk, and Trump is such an interesting point, or such an interesting case study in this like incredible argument she makes about the brandification of American companies, that they've, Nike, for example, owns intellectual property and then has other factories that they buy from. But it's the Nike IP that Nike is based around. It's not making Nike. It's buying from people who make Nike, and then it's branding it with the IP. Trump truly is that.
Yes, he sure is.
Like everything.
Trump Baku.
Trump steaks. Just
Trump University.
Unbelievable how Donald Trump. But that's what's so almost Shakespearean about this, is that Trump, as that man, the man who is her case in point, is also now the person who is pissing off all of the multinational corporations, all of the investors. He is the one who is giving the middle finger that I think people who were lobbing Molotov cocktails at the WTO or in Seattle in 1999, that is what, if it were coming from one of them or Bernie Sanders, it'd be like, I am watching this burn and it's feeling great. Now that might not be a substantive critique of Naomi. I thought it was really interesting to hear her reflect on that. And it is so Shakespearean that Donald Trump is the guy who represents everything she was arguing exists, rightfully arguing exists. But on the other hand, I think there's something to be said for, like, Trump may embody all of those bad things, but the alternative, there's no alternative. There's Bernie, but other than that, like, Bernie doesn't control the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has said no to Bernie over and over again. And Republicans did that. They said no to their populists over and over again, and they got Trump. And now it's like, who? If it's not him, who? And if it's not, the only way you get it with Trump is this insane process. And I just don't think the jury's fully out on whether or not what Trump does. I'm not saying it's a big possibility. I've said this all show, but there is a possibility that he does actually restructure global trade in a way
he's doing it.
restructure global trade in a way that is ultimately productive. I'm not saying it's a 90% chance, but there's a chance, and maybe I'm too hopeful.
And the analogy I was thinking of, and I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler, but like let's say in the 1920s, Rosa Luxemburg is out there, and the German communists and socialists are out there saying, like, look, another world is possible. The Weimar Republic, terrible. We want to get rid of it and replace it with something different. And then the National Socialists end up winning and replacing it with something different. You wouldn't be like, oh, well, I guess you're happy then, right? You got something different. It's like, no, it's worse.
Yeah.
It can always be worse, is my point.
Yeah.
And just because you were against something doesn't mean you're necessarily for the thing that replaces that thing.
And I think that was a really good point to hear from both you and Naomi. Like, I do agree with this. And I don't want to ascribe this to her because I don't know if it's necessarily true, but I do think that there's sometimes just this, because Trump is such a polarizing and bizarre figure, sometimes there's just this barrier. It's like a cultural barrier that people on the left are still like really icked out about ever transgressing and ever saying, we wanted radical politics and here's the radical politics of Donald Trump. It's like when Susan Sarandon, one of my favorite moments, longtime viewers of the show will know, was talking to Chris Hayes and got just massive viral attention for saying that that maybe by not voting for Hillary, if Trump wins, he will bring the revolution sooner. Yeah. And Chris Hayes was like, you mean in a Leninist way? It's just like, yep. Yeah. And sometimes it's just, to me, some of these leftist politics are so, and I think fascinatingly radical. I feel like that's the world that you were steeped in. Mm-hmm. And it's like the Schellenberger headline that you talked about. What did y'all think post-liberalism meant? Vibes, papers, essays?
It's pretty funny. I'll give him that.
It is. It is.
A little trite, but I'll give him that.
That was a great interview. I'm really, I thought it was fascinating. I was really appreciative that she sat down and you did such a great job. So.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Naomi. We really appreciate it, and thank you for the idea.
Oh, yeah, anytime. I'm full of ideas.
There you go. All right, well, so we'll be back, I assume, on Friday. We'll be down another 10% by then.
We'll see.
Headed towards zero.
Ryan's the one who's community noting David Sachs. That's right. Just every hour. He's correcting him.
Hey, good luck out there, people.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you back here with Crystal. Maybe Sagar. Maybe we can pull Sagar into one of our Friday sessions. He's very busy right now, but maybe we can pull him in
someday. It's a little time conflict, but maybe we can get him this Friday. Yep.
Yeah, we'll try.
All right. See you then.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.